our Q&A mic?
Yes.
Have you got some training on it?
I just learned how to turn it on.
Turn it on and leave it on what you want.
Yeah.
Hi, good to see you. You ready? Here's audio for our camera crew. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A little audio check for film recording, okay? You're all good? Guys good? I'll keep talking. I see you adjusting your camera a bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, audio check for video.
What I suggest is that you pick either chair because there's no name. Sit him. You sit here. I will introduce you, and then I will sit, and then you go, and then you come back, and then we do the conversation. Ooh, and be careful.
Hey, how are you, Ken? Good to see you.
Yep. There's a be careful
For
the TV. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Hey, how are you, Susan? That's our former trustee, Susan Hutchison. We have other distinguished guests, the former ambassador to Georgia, Kenneth Yalowitz, who's here, I think. Where is he? There he is. Former ambassador to Georgia, Richard Miles, Wilson Fellow, Anders Wimbush, who's been enormously helpful in supporting this visit. And welcome to all of you. Special applause for braving the rain and the potential hurricane to be here for an important event at the Wilson Center. I'm Jane Harman, the president and CEO, and I had my own issues getting in here today, so I'm enormously impressed that you're here. We are honored to welcome President Giorgi Margvelashvili of Georgia. No doubt many of you, certainly including me, were here last week when the Pope visited for a number of days, and all eyes were focused on him. But we're pretty confident that all eyes will be focused on you for the next period, Mr. President. I have personally visited Georgia twice as a member of Congress. Tbilisi, as many of you know, is a beautiful and modern and basically corruption-free city, and you should all check it out. I was in Tbilisi when the first Georgian casualty of the war in Afghanistan came home. After the United States, Georgia has contributed the most warriors per capita to the coalitions in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a country that steps up and sacrifices for its friends and allies. And the President just told me that the 31st casualty, sadly, was welcomed home and honored this week. A week ago. Georgia is also a free, democratic nation in a very dangerous part of the world. The good example in a bad neighborhood. According to the World Bank, it's one of the world's top 15 countries to do business in. I saw it and I believe that. And according to Transparency International, it stands head and shoulders above its neighbors in combating graft and corruption. The whole rule of law issue is a priority for the Wilson Center, and it's nice to celebrate a good example. So we're proud to welcome Georgia's president here today. We'll talk about, or first he'll talk about his country's ties to the West, its contributions to international security, and its role in a changing Central Asia. President Margvelashvili, like President Wilson, is a public servant and a scholar. It's appropriate that he would choose to sketch his vision here at the Wilson Center, where ideas and policy intersect. He holds a PhD in philosophy, and he's known in Georgia, a very intellectual nation, as an intellectual leader in public policy. Before his presidency, he also served his country as its Minister of Education and Science and its first Deputy Prime Minister. In 2013, he was elected president with 62% of the vote. He's led an impressive administration ever since. So please join me in welcoming the President of Georgia to the Wilson Center.
Thank you. Thank you for the great introduction, and I want to welcome the distinguished audience in a distinguished place. I think there are few places in the world which would be so appropriate to visit and to discuss and share as the Wilson Center, because, to put it short, the goal of my mission and goal of all our international activities is basically targeted to put Wilsonian principles of international relations into action. Is basically to put the value and rule of law based foreign relationships into action in any part of the world. And this is extremely important because actually the way and the status and how small nations like Georgia exist and have its individual color on the world map, the way they perceive themselves and their role and their rights is very much connected to international relationships, international politics, which are based on values that Woodrow Wilson have spelled out and that we as a humankind have shared after the tragedies of 2 world wars. So Georgia is one of the countries that believes in these principles, that believes those principles should be put in action, and that believes that the consensus among the countries and the everyday international politics should be based on acknowledgement and strict conduction of those values. Georgia is a country that is a small country which is located in between Caspian and Black Seas and has as I believe, enormous meaning and potential and influence on the future development of the Caucasian region as well as the region of Eurasia at large. We are the country that is, let's say, in the middle of the Silk Road, a country that is connecting east and west, connecting Caspian Sea Basin with the Black Sea Basin, and the country that from the first days of its independence in the beginning of 90s of last century has identified itself as a transit and opportunities creating country for the region. And we have been dedicated to this goal, and we have been a trustworthy partner in this respect, and we are furthering our development in this direction. But furthermore, being a part of the Silk Road, which is also routes of which are running north to us as well as south to us, we present a very important solution for stability and choice in the Silk Road communications. In this respect, we keeping Georgia independent, keeping Georgia successful, keeping Georgia as a viable, democratic, strong democracy in the Caucasus is going to be decisive for future of a major region. We are also facing real problems in securing independence and sovereignty and territorial integrity of our nation. Our neighbor at the north, the Russian Federation, has violated the basic rules and principles of international relations and has directly occupied its friendly, not hostile, and a small nation. It has occupied two parts of our territories with its regular army in 2008 and has declared those occupied territories into new quasi-states, which it tries to push this policy. Apparently, this is not the only Georgian-Russian case, but it's a part of a bigger story, a story of Russian foreign policy, a story called the privileged interest zones, which basically is targeted to any of Russia's neighbors. So, Georgian story in 2008, as well as Ukrainian story in 2014, are a part of the same narrative, a geopolitical approach to its neighborhood, which basically, in understanding of Russian politicians, gives them the right to police its neighbors and to do this in a military format. We are part of that story, and we are victims of the story, and Georgia, as well as Ukraine, as well as Moldova, has suffered territorial issues just because of their own decision to develop their identity, their political orientation, their foreign policy within the rights that they have been granted as independent states and the rights that is protected by international law. So to sum up my short presentation and to give opportunity for a more interactive discussion, I believe that what we are looking for and the reason why I'm discussing this with our colleagues here is a very firm and unanimous support for the principles, for the values that have been laid out as the founding pillars of foreign policy, and for understanding the importance of the rule of law in relationships between the nations. We know those rules could not be policed like the rules, like the social rules, like the criminal code that is in our societies. But we call for a common sense, for importance of common sense in being very firm on asserting these rules. And I'm happy I have a possibility to talk about this and to emphasize this in a place which is associated with Woodrow Wilson and his principles and his values. Thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. President, I'll start with a few questions, and then we'll open it to audience questions. And for those in the audience, I'm not sure whether we have some in an overflow room also, but please state your name and ask a question. Don't make a speech. Ask one question also, so we can get around to everyone. Something that was not in your speech, Mr. President, was any mention of the minorities who live in your country. And my understanding is about 10% of your population is Muslim. We've all been reading in the newspaper in the last week or so about the effort of ISIL, ISIS, Daesh, this enormously toxic terror group in the Middle East, to recruit foreign fighters. And the number of foreign fighters recruited so far has gone way up. The estimates have gone up to about 30,000. I understand some of those, not a large number, have come from Georgia. What is your government doing to counter terror recruitment?
Well, yeah, this is a standing problem for majority of countries, and not only of the region, but of Europe and
of the U.S.
and
too.
of the U.S. too. And there is a bigger question how ISIS and those ISIL and other groups are able to maintain their financial stability and be able to recruit. But for sure, a couple of dozen people have been identified engaging in those activities from Georgia. And it is very interesting that you mentioned Muslim community. It is sad to observe that this happens in places where actually Muslim, traditional Muslim community is weakened. In the and this is very interesting detail of Georgian specifics, is where we have strong Muslim community living in a strong congregation, not nominally Muslim, but when they are part of congregation, you have much less and practically no engagements in ISIS. And in places where traditional Muslim values are weakened, that is basically the harvesting ground for ISIS, and this is very important and dangerous for us. What are we doing in this respect? We are trying to develop a legislature which will, on one hand, give us opportunities to engage more actively in the process, and on the other hand, not violate the rights of the citizens on peace, on freedom of movement, etc.
Well, I'm assuming from what you said that there is freedom of religion, any religion in your country.
Absolutely.
And no persecution of Muslims or other groups because of...
No, we had part of Muslim community traditionally in Georgia, and as I'm telling you, where we have strong Muslim communities, those communities are able to keep people away from ISIS.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a bit more about problems with what you called Russian aggression. I remember, I think we all do, what happened with Abkhazia and South Ossetia. You mentioned to me earlier that you're hoping that our Congress or our government could be helpful with a policy of non-recognition of occupied territories. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, sure. First of all, I have to mention and underline how thankful we are to our U.S. partners on international formats and in a joint activity for keep a very strong policy of non-recognition. Now, the non-recognition policy is directly targeted to counterbalance Russia's foreign policy attempt to try to basically legitimize the occupation through creation of these so-called states and to an attempt for the international community to accept this. This has been happening. This has been happening for a long time, and Georgia has been successful enough in counterbalancing this policy, and we have practically a unanimous international support in non-recognition of the occupied territories. And we have great support from our US partners on doing so. But I think we need even more firm confirmation of this policy and a firm condemnation, not only on international formats, but just bilaterally by United States, where we could state that United States will never accept this kind of violation of international law, international relationships, and that the Russians' case scenario, that at some point international community will accept the status quo of occupied territories, is not going to be feasible ever. So this is something that we have been discussing with our colleagues in the meetings, and I believe that this is something that will help Georgia, but not only help Georgia. I believe this is something that will make principles of peaceful cooperation between nations and condemnation of violence even stronger. And we do need principle and harder voices in condemning violence.
Well, obviously, another case that comes to mind is Crimea on the one hand, and then the eastern part of Ukraine on the other. If Petro Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine, called you this morning and asked for advice, what would you suggest he do with respect to Russian aggression in his country?
Well, I basically, he does what he has to do. He's in a very tough situation. He's reforming his nation in the middle of the war, and that is very difficult. I mean, we have a ceasefire now in Ukraine, and that is a very positive sign, but the ceasefire doesn't mean the end of the war. And the ceasefire doesn't mean that the war will not be pushed from the battlefields to Ukrainian social politics, to welfare issues, and to other issues that Ukrainian people have to demand, and where we have to have intensive reform process. So Mr. Poroshenko is in the middle of the war that Georgia has gone through some 6 years ago, and we are in full support of his fight for sovereignty, for territorial integrity, as for the freedom of Ukrainian choice.
You mentioned his social and economic issues. He's made no secret of the fact that his effort to clean up corruption and impose rule of law in Ukraine is not going very well. What was the secret sauce that made it work in Georgia when it doesn't work in most countries?
Well, it was a very tough process, a process which was linked to the demand, the social demand from the voters, which was based on the acknowledgement of the fact that Georgia was turning into a really failing system. And so it took a courage of lots of political leaders, as well as the public servants, to conduct this reform, and the reform is still going on for fighting the corruption and for keeping corruption figures low, simultaneously maintaining a strong and feasible and workable government.
Well, it is impressive, because most countries around the world, especially in your region, have not come close to that. And so, again, congratulations. You mentioned the New Silk Road, which is an initiative of China. And China is making big investments, as you know, in Eurasia and Central Asia. Georgia was one of the first countries to join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And many in this country, including me, think it was perhaps a mistake for our country not to join it. But where does China fit into Georgia's future? Do you see it as an either-or choice between the West and the East, or do you think you can have strong relations with China and strong relations with the West?
Well, I think China is very much contributing to our geopolitical role and is creating a very impressive venue for developing the Silk Road concept. As I have mentioned in my opening remarks, this is very much in line for the geopolitical identity that we have been defining for the last couple of decades. In this respect, it is very important for us that China views Georgia as a strategic part of the Silk Road route. And as I have described, with opportunities in south, with opportunities in north, but with both of those opportunities having serious question marks on stability, on political bargaining, which is linked together with the with those projects. Georgia creates a great opportunity for the entire Silk Road to be successful and to open the options for transportation and communication formats. That's why we are very much considering China to be as strategically engaged in Georgia, and we are even we even started a feasibility study with China on the free trade agreement, as well as engagement of Chinese companies in developing infrastructure systems in Georgia. So they are very much into it, and we are very much into developing and strengthening Silk Road capacities in Georgia.
But you don't see this as a zero-sum game, am I right? It's more with China, less with the West?
No,
it's
no,
it's win-win, more and more.
No, it's not at all. It's not at all like that. We try to use those opportunities. One of the reasons of me being in DC is discussing the opportunity of the free trade agreement, which has been supported by President Obama and President Saakashvili some 3 years ago, and those activities, I believe, should be revamped. Our most important recent achievement was signing free trade agreement with EU, the DCFTA, deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the European Union. And with that agreement, we started reforming and are still reforming our economy, the standards, the procedures, the legislation based on EU standards. So we try to, Georgia has a very liberal and open trade policy, and that is natural for a country which is viewing itself as a transit country. So in that respect, I think we are very much consistent with our goals, with our geopolitical goals, and in this respect, we don't think that there is some kind of competition between China and the West, especially on Georgian soil.
Well, I think our country's experience with FTAs has been very positive. Again, other countries benefit and we benefit by engagement in the world. My speculation is that the special trade representative is totally preoccupied right now with trying to get the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement done, but that support has been expressed at high levels in our government, and as soon as there are more brain cells to focus on this, it will hopefully advance. Is there anything you would like this talented audience to do on behalf of an FTA between Georgia and the U.S.?
Well, I just want to note that the free trade agreement with Georgia was a political pitch from the Obama administration, which is something that has to be used and embraced. I think that FTA not actually the final goal of FTA, but even the negotiation process on FTA is a great opportunity for increasing the reform process in Georgia. That's what we felt when we enjoyed working for the DCFTA targets, because even through the process of trying to reach the benchmarks for DCFTA, the process and the agenda of achieving that has brought a lot of positive for development of Georgian political system, as well as for development of the trade opportunity. So FTA and the road to FTA is a great opportunity for furthering Georgia and furthering Georgian-American bilateral relationships, which I believe should be revamped.
And a huge driver of not just political change, but political stability.
It is.
Right. Okay, audience, we're welcoming your questions. Remember, a question. Identify yourselves and ask a question. One question. The gentleman right here.
Thank you, Mr. President. Anatoly Bachinin, TASS News Agency, Russia. Mr. President, in fact, Georgia has not supported US and European sanctions against Moscow. So what's your view how trade and economic relationships between Georgia and Russia will develop in near future? Thank you.
Thank you. Georgia has supported some of the sanctions which we considered were relevant. We didn't join with the other group of sanctions. We believe that Russia and Georgia in future should build the relationships that are based on a very interesting opportunities on trade, partnership, cultural relationships, the relationships that could be of benefit for Georgians and for Russians. Actually, when I'm thinking about tomorrow's or the day after tomorrow's Georgian-Russian relationships, I think about opportunities that we all, Georgians and Russians, could enjoy if we start thinking about individual Georgian and individual Russian and the decisions that affect and positively affect concrete individuals and concrete families. The point of Georgian-Russian relationships is a little bit strange. I mean, during our confrontation and during occupation of Georgia, neither of Russian families or Russian citizens or any kind of Russian problems were solved while rolling tanks into Tkhinvali or Sukhumi. By this occupation, none of Russian citizens benefited. But it was on the contrary. Georgia lost territories, and we have occupied territories temporarily, but they are. The people, our citizens who are living on those occupied territories, they are living in a strange, quasi-invented states with no real visible perspective. Russia has got international humiliation because of occupying friendly small country. So usually in the history of wars we read that one nation lost and the other gained. We have a very strange situation where there was lose situation for all the parties engaged in this process. So we crafted a relationship that is not bringing any feasible positive results for anyone engaged in the process. So when I'm thinking about the future of relationships with Russia, I'm thinking about great opportunities that we have if we start thinking about the benefits of concrete people living in Moscow, living in Khabarovsk, living in Ekaterinburg, and what can we bring positive through our relations for them. And I believe that trade is something that will really have in a positive dynamics in future.
Other questions? Way in the back, blue shirt.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Dean Pinellas. My wife and I had the privilege of living in your country for a year in 2008, 2009. We were there when the Russians invaded. I worked for the American Bar Association Rule of Law Project. So I have a question focused on the rule of law. First of all, could you explain the status of jury trials in Georgia and also the status of the gay and lesbian community in Georgia? And I have in mind, in that regard, the anti-gay riots in Tbilisi in May 2013.
You snuck in two questions, but you did it. You succeeded.
So, first about the jury trials that have been on the top interest of media and also discussions, political discussions. I see this process in the following way. We have political leaders which were in government, in the previous government, who are accused for some kind of misdoings. They are brought to court, and in some cases, court rules on those allegations, and these people are sentenced from time to time. Now there are several details. First, there was a negative tendency that these people were kept in the pre-trial detention, and not only these people, but generally it turned out that there are many people that were kept in a pre-trial detention for more than 9 months. And this was absolutely unacceptable. And I have made comments of this for the last year. I was saying that this is not a European tradition. But recently, the Constitutional Court ruled on those cases and basically prohibited any kind of accused person to be in the pretrial detention more than 1 month. And I think that this decision is a real achievement for development of Georgian judiciary. And according to this decision, we don't have any more than 9 month pretrial detention people being kept in jail. Now, when you have a case with political leader being accused for some kind of misdoing, naturally this case in a format of open media, in a format of open discussion, naturally this case has political comments. I mean, both parties, they comment on the issue and they have a venue for those comments, and they have an opportunity to share those comments with society. And they are naturally the party which in opposition is trying to say that this is a false allegation. That's the part of democracy. They have the right to do so. And there naturally now there are question marks about those rulings of the court. But I will tell you, I mean, I believe in Georgian in future development and strengthening of Georgian judiciary, and I'm one of an active contributors to the strengthening of Georgian judiciary, because I appoint judges, and I have appointed already 4 judges in the Supreme Court, including the chairman of the Supreme Court. So believing in this system, I say if there are question marks, the system should answer those question marks. There are rulings on the first level of the court. Go to appeal. Take this case to the Supreme Court, and I believe with the level of openness and the level of professionalism and freedom which I try to contribute and improve the Supreme Court, we will reach the real verdicts. And there might be still allegations in some kind of political decisions, but be this process completely open, I think that those allegations will be much less. And I'm very much for the court system to answer those issues. This is a part of our democracy, and this is a part of a normal functioning judiciary in a state where you have checks and balances and separation of power. Now, on gay and lesbian issues, strangely enough, I'll go back to FTA and the achievement that we had through DCFTA process, which I just have mentioned before. As a part of the DCFTA process and the association agreement, we have been able to introduce the law on gender equality and to pass the law in the parliament with the bipartisan support. So we are now in a new status and a new reality where the rights of where the rights of LGBT community, as well as other rights of any kind of minorities, are protected by the law. Even more, we are thoroughly monitoring the cases where those issues will be taken to court or will be taken to the public defender, the ombudsman. And we try to look at those cases and observe these cases. So you mentioned 2013, but then there was dynamic. Then there was 2014 when we adopted the law, and now we are in 2015, living within this legislature and not finding real, confrontation either on the fact of of adopting this legislation, nor in depth on these issues. And I think that that's the way the Georgian civil society will grow in future.
One piece of the question that you did not answer, or the 2 questions, was about jury trials. I might.
Oh, the jury trials, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Jury trials, and while we're at it,
Yeah.
one of the questions from the overflow room, we've got a lot of people here, is specifically about the arrest of the former mayor of Tbilisi. And some
I think
claims.
that I answered that question.
So
basically.
that's answered in your
Yeah.
basic answer.
Yeah.
Okay. What about juries?
Well, I think that this is I'm not really qualified to answer on the jury issue because it's an experiment for Georgian judiciary, which we still have to observe how well the system have been absorbed by the whole system. So we are in the process of observing how successful this is. But it's a tough issue because I mean it is very much based on the concept of a society being engaged in one or another format in the juridical. I mean, I think that I don't have exact feeling whether Georgia has accepted this at this point or not. We still have to wait and test how it works. But it is adopted, you know about.
Well, the concept here is that the judgment of one's peers is the best form of judgment on whether someone is guilty or innocent.
I agree with
baked into our system.
Well, that's not baked in your system, but that's also baked into the whole society which is a great goal for us. But that is very important. I mean, we have been a state and a country that was occupied for the last 200 years and occupied by a very harsh force. This was Soviet Union, and before it was Russian Empire. So what is deep down in our subconscious is when you are taken to court, when you are taken to be prosecuted, it's not your compatriots that are doing this, but it is the dangerous, the invader, someone who is essentially an enemy for you, and the system works as that. So this is in our past experience. Now, to break this experience and to introduce the whole concept that we all together execute the rule of law, and the law that we share and the laws that we have created, not as for oppression but for living together, it has to still take time. And that's why I'll see how the jury system has really became the whole concept of introducing and strengthening the rule of law in Georgia is one of my main political challenges. Not the concept we have smart. I mean, this is totally different than having smart lawyers. I mean, the concept that you understand the legislature or you are smart in legislation does not come together with the concept of rule of law. I mean, it's not identical with the rule of law. But I've seen lots of lawyers who are great in jurisprudence, but they essentially don't believe in rule of law. They believe that they have, through this knowledge, they have to cheat. But there are some people who are not at all educated, but they feel the rule of law and they conduct it in their actions. So this is a whole mentality development process that has to go through, and basically I spoke so much to tell you that I don't have the answer.
What a refreshing answer. Susan Hutchison. Wait, you need a microphone. A lot of press around the world wants to
Okay.
ask this question.
Tehran is closer to Tbilisi than it is to Damascus. You have only a small landmass of buffer between you and Iran. There's a growing alliance between the Russians and the Iranians. Are you feeling squeezed? And what are your concerns for the future?
Tehran and Iran is a very interesting new development in the region, and especially it's mainly not Moscow-Iran, but it's the DC-Tehran relationships that are going to change the status in the region, because Moscow-Tehran relationships were there for ages, and which did not really turn in any kind of threat to Georgia, specifically from that perspective. Now, DC-Tehran relationships is something that we are looking as at an opportunity, because refinding Iran and bringing it back to the process, one of the routes apparently is Georgia. And this is an opportunity for Georgia as a country which believes that it is a transit country and believes that it is a place for negotiations and for finding each other. It's a bridge between East and West. So how are we looking at this issue? With great interest and with the hope that those are the opportunities.
In the back, in the middle, in the gray suit. Microphone, please. Did we lose the microphone?
Thank you.
No. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. Well, there are two of you. You go ahead, and then the man in the gray suit with glasses after you.
Thank you. I'm Nana Sajaya, representing Voice of America, Georgian Service. Mr. President, the decision by the Constitutional Court you spoke about, a very popular one, caused political debates, as you mentioned. And following that decision, there is a online petition going on asking you to pardon former Tbilisi mayor and opposition leader Giorgi Margvelashvili. Is there any chance you would consider doing so?
I normally don't discuss concrete cases on international conferences, but let me respond to that case specifically. The ability to pardon someone is a very important function of the state that is given into the hands of president, and that is a function that is counterbalancing the other hand of the state, which is normally punishing for violations. Of course, if case of Ugulava will be brought officially to discussions, I will discuss this issue. But specifically on this case, I can tell you that the issue will be considered not from political perspective. The right to pardon a person is a great human value opportunity that the president has. It is not linked to political issues. It is not linked to the proper or wrong decisions of the courts. It is not linked to populist decisions. So, if Ugulava's case will be brought to me in a form of appeal, I will consider it, but there will be no component, no political component involved in my judgment on this case. Now, it is very important to keep it so and to keep this function non-political. And I believe there are people in Georgia who question how right was the court when they ruled on Ugulava. And I think I have already answered for this question. You have to go to courts, you have to go to the next level of the court. If you don't have a success there, you have to go to the Supreme Courts and come to an acceptable verdict within the court system and not find solutions somewhere else.
Thank you. There's the man in the middle of the room, sixth row. I'm looking at him in a gray suit. You. He's waving his hand.
Hi, Tom Babington. I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Georgia. I had a quick question about Georgia's relationship with Turkey. As I understand, several Turkish ships have been detained by Georgia in the past for engaging in trade with Abkhazia. And Turkey has actually sent political delegations, I think, to Sukhumi. So my question is, what does this illegal trading and engagement with Abkhazia mean for Georgia and Turkish relations in the future? Thank you.
I don't think we are talking about real Turkish policies in this case, and we are talking from on occasions that have happened from time to time where we have not seen engagement of the Turkish government, but we have seen it as just separate cases which have been responded from both of the sides. But let me use an opportunity and say that Turkey is a strategic partner of Georgia on the most of its projects and the biggest economic partner, bilaterals. We have the biggest trade with Turkey. We have free trade agreement with a visa-free agreement with Turkey. So we are great partners, and we are developing those partnership and deepening the partnership with the joint further projects, like for instance TAP and TANAP, which are furthering the energy supplies Caspian energy supplies to Turkey, as well as those projects will be continued till Italy. So, yeah, I mean there have been a couple of cases, but this was not linked with Ankara as such.
Well, let me just add to that question, though. Turkey has played a mixed role in this fight against ISIL, ISIS, Daesh, and many have accused it of being much more interested in bombing the Kurds than in actually going against ISIS. What role are you playing, and are you aligned with Turkey in that role?
Oh, we are part of alliance condemning and ISIL and part of this political alliance jointly. We are not linked with any other country. Sort of, we are not in those packs of countries, whether it be Turkey or Russia, which have their own versions of how to deal with the issue. We are basically in the camp of the countries that condemns ISIS and acknowledges a sad fact that there is no policy against ISIS.
If you were asked to develop the best policy against ISIS and all the countries wanted to follow you, what would that policy be?
Let me take time for answering this question. I don't think I have an answer to this question, but I think that any kind of actions, okay, I'll tell you how I would start.
Okay.
Definitely, I would not do my own congregation, but I would start from a consensus among the countries, and this is also very important. Those kind of visions and missions, they have to be based and united, and it should be basically a UN process that would be facing the solutions, and it should be built as a big consensus of humankind and not separate groups that find their smart solutions.
Okay. Question here, third row. Microphone down here, third row. He's raising his hand. Sorry, right here.
Thank you, Mr. President. Zach Davis. My question is, in light of Ukraine...
What's your affiliation?
You met American University. My question is, in light of the Ukrainian conflict, how has your relationship and the region's relationship with NATO been impacted?
How has our and whose?
And like the region,
yeah,
neighboring countries.
Well, with NATO we have a very firm and assertive policy. We want to become members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and I think we have contributed and done a lot for this goal. First of all, let me mention once again and pay the respect and tribute to Georgian men and women who are in action and has been in action and have been committing their lives for the global stability with NATO forces, ISAF, Resolute Support Mission, other places, the Gulf before. We have been, and we are right now, one of the most NATO force compatible armies, which are non-NATO members. We are part of the quick response forces. We have modernized our army with the NATO standards, and up to more than 11,000 of our soldiers have been trained in NATO standards. We have inaugurated a month ago a training and evaluation center for NATO in Georgia. We have been given a substantial package of partnership with NATO on the Wells Summit. So where we are is we have basically fulfilled most and overwhelmingly all the requirements for becoming NATO members, and we are a country that has modernized its society in the same standard. So, and saying this, we demand for membership. And of course, what Ukrainian case has done to NATO is that it has somehow brought a state of more conservative state to the entire organization. I believe that on the Ukrainian format, the entire organization is rethinking its place and its priorities and its action plans. So, now in the process of rethinking, they are pretty conservative, and they are in the process of understanding themselves what they should do and where they are. So we are waiting for the window of opportunities and pushing for the same target and goal.
Let me ask another question from the overflow room. I was recently in Ukraine, and when you're there, you see the overwhelming influence of Russian media. Barely any Ukrainian media or other media is available. And so this question is, how does Russian influence in media and on NGOs affect your upcoming parliamentary elections?
It's a very, very, very proper question. It does. It definitely does. With the bigger democracy and open media, we have now many voices talking about in Russian direction. We have now when we had no, let's say, pro-Russian political powers before, now we have pro-Russian political speakers. Now we have pro-Russian NGOs. Now we have much more pro-Russian rhetorics. It is very consistent with the Russian message from Russian media sources, which is built in a following format. Listen, guys, you want whatever you want, but here on the ground, we are the ones that decide, and you have no perspective, be it NATO, be it EU, be it other choices that you have. Here is the reality on the ground, and the reality on the ground is that you are part of the Russian backyard. This is the way it works. It is effective, it's efficient, it influences voters. It will not break our will because all Georgian governments were pro-Western. With more or less efficiency, all the governments that we had since the independence were pro-Western. They are pro-Western, and they will be pro-Western because this is the demand from society. This is something that our voters push us to, and this is an overwhelming demand. But is there a competition for some floating and indices of people? Yes, there is a competition, and we have to acknowledge this competition and fight this competition within a more complicated arena of democracy where everyone has the word.
Thank you. I'll take one more question here, and then there's a wonderful question from the overflow room to close with. Who will not be mad at me? Someone else made the decision to call on you, sir, so my apologies to others.
Mr. President, thank you for being here. My name is Lasha Gasradze. I'm with the McCain Institute. I have plenty of questions, obviously, as we all do, but I'm going to stick
one
with one.
Would suffice.
I'm going to stick with one.
One really good one.
Absolutely. To what extent do you think there is a perhaps hindrance, if you will, with the investment climate in Georgia, specifically as it relates to the Western investment, when we have, I don't want to say reports, but facts that there is inflow of Russian investment, traditional Russian investment coming to Georgia? Do you see a possibility that there could be a hindrance and perhaps a hesitation from the Western investors seeing this? Do you see any correlation there at all?
Well,
thank you very much.
Frankly, I would happy to have FDA from any place in the world for Georgian economy, but I don't see any great Russian interest or investments at this point. I don't think that would somehow conflict with, if they were, I mean, if Russian businessmen want to invest in Georgia and engage in many of opportunities of Georgian economy and tourism, agriculture, energy sector, there are lots of opportunities in Georgia. And Georgia is a pretty business open market. I think that there is no danger in Russians investing in Georgia when it's a private foreign investment. And I don't think it conflicts with investments from the West. The main thing is not who invests, if we are not talking about some security dangerous investments like terrorists and so on, but it is how they invest and what is the environment for investment. And in this respect, I was talking about the DCFTA. We have created and we are broadening European format of doing business. Now into this European field, it makes no serious difference who is investing. I mean, does Hollande care if Russians invest into French dairy industry or other areas of French industry? No, I mean, they are happy to have Russian investments. And I don't think that this conflicts with Western investments, because the playing ground is totally European. And that's why I was talking about FTA with US, is that the process of FTA will make this ground even more civilized and more, let's say, pro-Western. So,
last question from the overflow room, this is wonderful, is what do you want your legacy as president to be?
Okay, this is a good question to end our meetings. I want to bring Georgia to the next level of stable and strong democracy, which means I want my name to be associated with strengthening of institutions. Publicly, I want, not politically, but in the social field, I want to be associated with strengthening with the whole concept and feeling of the rule of law and its adoption in society. And finally, though I'm not a member of a political party, and I don't intend to become a member of a political party, I want to be associated with strengthening political parties as the main players on Georgian political field. That is extremely important, because we had and have confrontations between political groups, and that is different. And we have to have strong political parties with strong ideologies, stable and there to stay. So those are my tentative goals.
And let me add just one more, perhaps, based on this conversation we had this morning, and that is to be remembered as someone who gives candid answers to a range of questions and is willing to admit when he doesn't have an answer. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.